Kia ora and welcome. My name is Mark Treadwell and this is a series of videos looking at the future of learning, and we're now moving into section 2 of the book, and in this section of the book we're looking at the learning process itself. One of the things we've assumed for a long time is that young people know how to learn, and also for ourselves as educators I think we assume also we know how to learn and we've got a language around learning. But that's not always the case, and so what we want to do in this section is look at how can we add these new things. How can we give learners agency over their work? How can we give learners the competency to take on that agency? How can we start looking at a more conceptual curriculum, knowing that in fact our ability to learn ideas and concepts is far more efficient than our ability to learn via rote. So where do we get that space from? Because most educators I know are not saying to themselves halfway through the year, goodness me, I'm running out of things to teach. We don't have that problem. We're always looking for extra time. So what we have to look at is how can we do learning in the classrooms more efficiently. There are several ways we can address this, and one of the prime introductions to this is the notion of why do we need to know how to learn? And part of the needing to know how to learn is the fact that now things are changing at such a pace that no matter what we do in our worlds, whether it's actually having to sort of access our phones to find out how to sort of take that photo and move it somewhere else or change the look of it, we are having to learn more and more every single day. And the more efficient we can learn, then the more efficiently we can get on with life itself. Because life now is much more about learning than it is remembering. So how do we do that? Well, we're looking at several things, and we've talked earlier on around this notion of agency. Giving the child, the learner, agency over their learning means they have to understand the learning process. Also, though, it also means that that learner has to understand how to be competent. So we're looking at agency, we're looking at competencies, we're looking at the learning process, and we also want to introduce this notion of a micro lesson. We can teach in different ways, and one of the ways we've approached teaching and learning historically right around the world is we've had primarily a thematic curriculum. And in a thematic curriculum what we've done is we've looked at putting the theme in the centre of the picture, the content in the centre, and we then sat on the outside of that this notion of the concepts. And in fact that gave us a very, very busy thematic approach to learning. So if we did dinosaurs, for example, we can look in dinosaurs, for example, at cause and effect, what killed off the dinosaurs, and that on its own would be a unit of work. Then we can look at reproduction of dinosaurs, the transition in dinosaur structures in terms of they went from being very small to very, very large to being wiped out. How did that happen? We can look at the ecosystems that dinosaurs sat in. Okay, how long do they actually live for? What was the sequence that went through that process? There are lots of concepts on the outside, and when each child learns about dinosaurs, they get a different pick of that content. And we test them on the content afterwards. We get them to name the dinosaurs, we get them to give sequences of the geological periods of time, etc. What we need to do, if we want to actually teach efficiently, is actually put the concept at the centre rather than the context at the centre. And by putting the concepts at the centre, we start to look at things like cause and effect. And what we want our young people to experience is the concept of cause and effect in a number of different contexts. So we put the context on the outside. If you do that, then you only have to do 2, 3, 4 contexts, and the child, the learner, is then able to predict the other contexts that they may experience that concept through. So we're actually flipping the whole structure of curriculum to suit more how we learn efficiently. So we're not asking young people to remember lots of stuff and fill in diagrams and put the labels on them, etc. We're asking them actually to understand each concept and be able to predict how that might pan out in different contexts. And that is a much more efficient way of learning. So that's just one way. Another way of doing this is actually then taking that concept and teaching it through a micro lesson. And the micro lesson is unpacked through the book in this chapter, so you can go to chapter 11 and look at the micro lesson itself, and it's panned out. But essentially what a micro lesson does is compress a unit of work around a concept down to about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And by doing that, you can get through much more work much more quickly by having the students become learners, take agency over their work, and they can go off and we give them a prompt, which we'll talk about in more detail in a moment. We give them a prompt to start them off, they get engaged, they go and look at the relationship between these variables that they might be looking at, such as cause and effect, and they come back with one context. And then we ask the groups to, okay, go away and each do a different context. And then the learners come back and teach each other, one group at a time, each of their contexts, until each of the learners have got the concept. And that can all happen in about 2 hours. So this notion of that every unit of work lasts 10 weeks, we need to get rid of. You know, when God invented the world and the planet, he didn't sort of modularize it into 10-week units. Oh yeah, dinosaurs, that will take 10 weeks. Electricity, that will take 10 weeks. Heroes, that takes 10 weeks. Why? You know, it's just a random thing. So we need to reconceptualize how we do learning in order to get these new things in. And that's our challenge. So I suggest go and have a look at chapter 11, read through the ideas that are presented in there, and then try making those changes one at a time in your classroom and see what happens. You be the judge, because if it doesn't work, then we just don't do it. But if it does work, it could save us an enormous amount of time. Thank you very much.